What's going on YouTube? It's Tej back again with another video, and today I'm reacting to Bleacher Report's latest big board of sorts. They kind of do it a different way, but just want to talk about some more NFL draft content for y'all. So hopefully you all are doing okay, and hopefully you all enjoyed today's video. If you do, hit that like button, it would help me out a ton. And if you're new to the channel, want to see more sports content like this, hit that big red subscribe button, and of course comment your takeaways from this big board of sorts down in the comment section. I guess it's titled with a big board, so sure, we'll call it a big board. Tell me what you think down in the comment section. Who do you think they have too high? Who do you think they have too low? What do you think about what I'm saying? Love to talk some football. It's the NFL Draft with you. Aiden Hutchinson here on the cover photo. So to kind of break it down a little bit, they have these 5 people who, put together this board, and they have like this scale with it. So, the 9 basically, or butter, is your blue chip. And then you have first rounders up through 8s, and then your second rounders, and then mid 7s, and 3rds, and then so on and so forth, basically by half point tiers. And then different individuals break down different position groups, which then makes this even more complicated once we get to how these all fit together and whatnot. But that's kind of the fun of the video and what makes it interesting and why I wanted to do this today. So let's jump right into it. Kayvon Thibodeau is still their number 1 player, and it's actually George Karlaftis at number 2. And I think there's a big push for Aiden Hutchinson to start getting first overall pick consideration, especially if it's the Lions, right? Keep them in state. But I think Hutchinson and Thibodeau are basically neck and neck, 1A, 1B. Ultimately, there's more to it than this, but it comes down to, are you leaning on your priors, right? Like Kayvon Thibodeau came into this year as someone we thought could be a number 1 overall pick and has put up numbers the past couple of seasons. Or are you looking at this and saying, what have you done for me recently? And Hutchinson's been better in that category. He had a broken leg a year ago, and then he's been terrific so far this season. 15 pressures against Ohio State, and he beat up on Nicholas Petit-Frere, who's, late first, early second type of caliber tackle. So, Hutchinson's super impressive. So I would have him here at 2, and I'm really surprised Karlaftis is this high. But again, it comes down to what these 5 people see in these players, and then they average out the score. So it gets a little wonky, and it makes for an interesting video for sure. Evan Neal at 3, I can't complain about that. Tyler Linderbaum, I think a lot of people would make the argument he is blue chip because he's as good a center prospect we've seen in years. But here at 5, that's pretty high. I don't know if they weigh positional value. I do when I make my big board, which I'm going to be updating maybe next week, maybe the week after, but I'll have an updated look at that here pretty soon. And I weigh positional value, and because of that, that's the biggest deterrent to putting Tyler Linderbaum this high, right? Because he's fantastic. He's a great player, and he's by far the best player at, center. He could probably play guard, maybe. I'm kind of iffy on that, actually. But interior offensive lineman, he's probably the best of the bunch, and definitely if we're talking strictly center. So that makes it really tough to kind of weigh where you should put him in this, because he's the best center by far, but it's also a center. So, is it worthy of putting him in the top 5? That's a debate for you to have. Ike Ekwonu, a guy who's been one of the biggest risers this year, right? Not only is we all kind of knew he would be mean, run blocking, a mauler, a bulldozer, but he's looked pretty good, and he's held up in pass protection, and he's done a good job doing it at tackle, right? It's not like he's going against an interior offensive lineman at guard, and he's held his own and improved his pass blocker. He's done it at the toughest position you could do it, and I know the ACC's having a bit of a down year, but he's still doing it in one of the Power 5 conferences, and, he's done it against good teams and good opponents. So, Ike Ekwonu, fantastic year he's put together, and it's really boosted his stock. I'd put him in this blue chip category. I'd probably knock him up into the 9s, right? I'd call him a top 10 pick. I have a hard time seeing him not going in that vicinity. Then you got Jordan Davis. The only tough part here is it's kind of interesting. He's above Derek Stingley. I wonder how much that is his injury this year, right? And I know Stingley was the best his freshman year and a part of that 2019 championship team, but even since then, while it hasn't been as good, you've still seen the flashes in the moments. He'll test in the 4.3s when it comes to his 40, and he's got the size, he's got the weight. He looks like a number 1 shutdown quarter, but we'll get to him in a moment. Jordan Davis 7's pretty high, especially considering how much he actually plays for Georgia. That is a whole lot of praise to give a guy who's playing maybe 50% of their defensive snaps. I get it, though. He is as good a run stuffer as it gets. And not even necessarily what he can do getting off of blocks and shedding and using his hands and just being a strong dude, and he can bull a little bit. But, just his size, like 6'6", almost 350, right? That dude is going to eat up blocks, and he's going to stuff the middle just off his frame alone. So his frame plus his talent makes him a, for sure, high-level run stopper at the next level. And I think there's some capability for him to get better as a pass rusher. Again, I talked about, I think he has the ability to become a bull rusher up the middle. We see Vita Vea push around centers all the time just because he's stronger than people, and he can kind of bull rush right up the middle and make QBs uncomfortable. I think Davis has the potential to be someone like that. Back to Derek Stingley Jr., I'm still really high on him, and he's still my CB1. He's CB1 here, and he just has the traits, right? And I'm somebody who, when it comes to the draft, I like traits. I want to see somebody who could become the best at their position, right? I was a huge fan of Josh Allen coming out of Wyoming, right? I had him over Josh Rosen and Sam Darnold and Baker Mayfield and the other QBs in that draft. And, you know, I was super high on Trey Lance last year. I like quarterbacks who just have the ability to, if it all works out, become just freaking natures and the best of their position, right? And it's not just for QBs. I think the same applies to other position groups. And Derek Stingley has the ability to where, you know, if he can get back to where he was, technically speaking, as a cornerback and play with some confidence like he did in 2019, that with, you know, the athletic profile, the size, frame, the arm length is there. He's strong enough. He can press the line. This guy has the making of being a shutdown number one corner. So because of that, I think you should chase him in the top 10. And because of that, I'd give him a 9.0 grade. I think he's a top 10 worthy pick. Drake London, I'm a little lower on London. That said, I'm not necessarily enamored by a lot of these wide receivers, especially considering you look at the last 3 years of classes. I think there is a step down, but that's just my opinion. And I like the two Ohio State guys, Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson, and I'm starting to grow on Treylon Burks. He's been able to work from the outside, and Drake London's kind of done similar things. He's been moved all around, which that I like. I like the idea of being able to have a wide receiver that plays inside-outside. I think Devontae Adams with Green Bay, and how they scheme him open by moving him around. And I think Drake London gives you that versatility. Plus, he has the big frame. And he has gotten better as a separator. He just still doesn't wow me in that area. I am biased towards people who naturally can just get themselves wide open. And that's the ability that someone like a Chris Olave or Garrett Wilson has that I'm not entirely sure Drake London does. So, that said, Chris Olave not far behind here at number 11. Sorry, a little break of the video there. Had to go answer my phone. But Chris Olave here at 11, I think he's probably my wide receiver one. I like him and Wilson. They just kind of do it in different ways in the sense that Wilson has the ability with his natural size. He's probably a little bit better at winning at the catch point, but I just still like the explosiveness that Olave brings. I think they'll run about the same time when it comes to 40, but it's something about Olave. He just looks so smooth, and then because of that, his burst feels natural, and he just knows how to separate down the field. And I like his game a lot. Kyle Hamilton's my guy. I'm a Notre Dame fan, if you didn't know. So there's rumors he might come back, actually. So not entirely sure Kyle Hamilton's even going to declare for the draft, especially now that it's official. Marcus Freeman is going to be the next head coach at Notre Dame. So there have been rumblings of that. I think it's probably the best thing for him if he does go to the NFL draft, because I think he's, you know, a top 10 caliber pick in this year's draft. So we'll see, but this is a guy who does it all. I mean, you've heard me, you know, rave about Kyle Hamilton. Fantastic in coverage, great size. He can play in the box. He wants to hit people. He's a do-it-all safety, and he can make a whole lot of defenses lose a whole lot of problems, whether it's in run defense or in pass coverage. He's an eraser when it comes to problems on the defensive side. Jahan Dotson, that's another one of those wide receivers I'm not crazy high on. He is relatively sudden. I think he's gotten more explosive out of his breaks and his routes. And the more I start to watch him down the stretch this year, and I'm starting to dive more into the tape and look at his season as a whole, I'm starting to like him a little bit more. But I don't know, man. Over Garrett Wilson, I'm not entirely sure on that. I mean, Big Ten fans, you let me know. How close do you think it is? I just think there's more to chase with Wilson given his size, and I think they'll run pretty similar. Wilson might run a better 40, honestly, and a faster 40, I should say. But I don't know. I think Wilson is probably my wide receiver too. Dotson probably the top 5 when it comes to that receiver group. But I don't know. I'm still a little iffy on what I actually think about Dotson. Kyer Elam, I'm a big Kyer Elam guy. I know the first half against Sanford wasn't pretty, but that guy can ball out. And I mean, outside of that one half, he's been shut down all year long. He's been doing the SEC. So I'm a big Kyer Elam fan. And then you got Treylon Burks. I again talked about him a little bit earlier with Drake London. I like his game. I think he's been able to win more on the outside, which is something I wasn't sure I was going to be able to say at this point, so I am a fan of his game for sure. And then Trent McDuffie, him and then Kyler Gordon, who's also on this list. I just kind of quickly looked through it, kind of see how everything shakes out position-wise. and we'll talk about that here in a moment. But McDuffie and Kyler Gordon, I think, are both, potential starting corners on the outside. McDuffie, I think, gives you a little bit more upside. He's been doing it for a little bit longer, and he's just technically a little bit more sound, I think, than Gordon. At least right now. And then, multiple years as a starter for McDuffie. And the only thing that holds him back, he's 5'11". We'll see how that shakes out once we get to the combine. Sometimes those heights, weights move a lot once we get to Indy. But, I'm a big fan of McDuffie's game. I think he's somebody you could just leave on an island, potentially at the NFL level, and, he can hold his own. Charles Cross, another big riser at the tackle position. He's just a raw prospect, and now he's putting it together. And he's doing it in the SEC, which, what more could you ask for? Cross probably my tackle 3, depends on what you want to call Ike Ekwonu. If you're calling Ike, an IOL, then I'd probably move Cross up to tackle 2 right behind Evan Neal. But if you're keeping Ekwonu at tackle, I'd move him down to 3. But all 3 are really, really good prospects. Kenyon Green gives you a ton of versatility. He's played literally all 5 offensive line spots. And that's valuable in itself once you get to the NFL. I'd love to see more NFL teams just embrace, hey, we want the 5 best offensive linemen I have out there, and just kind of go basketball-like, positionless, where, you're just like, hey, these are the 5 best guys we got. Where do you feel the most comfortable? And you figure it out from there. Kenyon Green kind of is somebody who could potentially allow an offense to do that eventually. But, playing experience at all 5 positions, and he's done it at a good level. So, what more could you ask for? Jameson Williams is a guy I'm starting to really, really dig, and I've enjoyed watching him at Alabama all year. He's a big play waiting to happen. And, not only is down the field, he can do it after the catch. He's so shifty, not only with straight line speed, but left to right, his agility and his suddenness is there. And I think he's better than John Mechie for sure, and he might be wide receiver 3 for me. I'm starting to really enjoy watching Jameson Williams and his game. I think he could very, very well sneak into the first round, which is kind of crazy because, start this process wasn't necessarily somebody that was on a whole lot of people's radar. David Ojobu, another big riser, and part of it, you play opposite of Aiden Hutchinson. That'll help out a ton. But he's done it in his own right. He's only been playing football, I think, for 5 years is what I read, and that's amazing in itself. So he's kind of one of these prospects like Ziggy Ansah from years ago with the Lions. Ziggy Ansah never quite fully hit an elite potential that I think was there, but Ojobu, similar situation where this guy, if he continues to learn the game and learn how to be a pass rusher, use his hands more cleanly, he's got the athletic ability to be, clear-cut edge 1, like top 10 at that position, just because his size, his speed, his explosiveness, and then, a late bloomer learning the game, it's all there. He could be a complete package as an edge rusher, so he's a bit of a boom or bust product, but at least if you're going to take him in the first round, I think you feel pretty good about what the quote-unquote bust might look like, because he's already putting up production despite not being all that well-versed in the game of football all that ready yet. And then Andrew Booth Jr., he's kind of feels like a polarizing corner. I'm not going to go through all these names from here on out, but Booth Jr., it feels like if you like his game and you think he's done a good job at Clemson, then you like him. And maybe if you haven't seen a whole lot of Clemson games, he's lower down on your CB rankings. I think he's as smooth as it gets. Like this sounds a little weird, but I like watching his hips. I think he mirrors corner or wide receivers really well. I don't know. I'm a fan of his game. And that said, probably right around that CB5 mark for me. But I think this is a really talented corner class, and I think there's going to be a whole lot of teams happy with whoever they end up with. Desmond Ridder, I'm not a big Desmond Ridder fan. The arm's okay. It's pretty good, I guess, and then he's got mobility, but sometimes the decision-making, the accuracy is super inaccurate, and I know I'm a person who fights for and makes the case for taking someone with high-end traits. I just think there's not an overly high ceiling for Desmond Ridder, despite a good arm and some mobility. I just think some of his other inconsistencies will hold him back mightily. And it's also one of those things where he didn't really necessarily get better this year, so it's also kind of tough to judge. Like, if he got better where he was last year, I'd obviously be a little higher on him. So that linear progression isn't quite there, so that holds me back as well. Kenneth Walker, my running back 1. This guy's been fantastic. What a get for Michigan State out of the transfer portal. He's fantastic, and he's just a guy who knows how to break tackles. He's elusive. He's slippery, and if you can make yards yourself, right, do it after contact, that's a really desirable trait out of that position. Jaquan Brisker is one of those safeties that kind of emerged early on this year, and then him and Daxton Hill is a little bit lower. 2 Big Ten safeties that have really made a name for themselves, and they're do-it-all guys. This is a really nice safety class to go with it. I'm a big Jordan Battle fan, but Brisker, Hill, Battle, Hamilton, guys who can play both free and strong. That is desirable at the NFL level. We'll go ahead and judge. Justin Ross is pretty high here at 25. I know a lot of people are fading him, but even outside of what he hasn't produced this year, I know the situation in Clemson hasn't been great. DJ Uiagalelei hasn't been great. The offensive line's been pretty poor. But he's a 6'4" guy who can go up and get it. And that's a pretty safe baseline to start with. Now, he does need to get better as a separator, but if he can go to the right situation where he can improve as a route runner, that guy could be a problem. Then we get to Sauce Gardner. I'm a big Sauce Gardner fan. He's got the size, he's got everything you want, and he's got the confidence, right? Like, this is a guy who just exudes, I'm better than you, and that in itself is pretty fun to watch. And it's something that when it gets talked about in broadcast and it gets highlighted and they get talked about, it ends up being one of my favorite parts of the broadcast. And as a broadcaster, I don't know, there's little things like that I notice. Zion Johnson, a little high for him. I've never really seen him all this high, but good tackle guard split there. Breece Hall, another running back that I think a lot of people are going to start to like once we get past Indianapolis. He's just a bruising dude, and he's just flat out kind of yoked, and I think he'll put up good bench press numbers, and I think he'll impress a lot of people there. Going up one player above him, Kenny Pickett. I'm not a big Kenny Pickett guy. He's been in the ACC for years, right? Why is it just now that he's breaking out? So I'm a little hesitant to fall in love with him. That said, his footwork looks a lot better, and that naturally, I think of this as like a former pitcher in baseball. When your mechanics get cleaned up, you naturally get a little bit more zip on it, so I think his arm's a little more live, and then his accuracy naturally is improved because his body is moving in one motion, so to speak. So I think Pickett has improved on the technical side, and that in itself is interesting. But 23-year-old quarterback, I think he's going to go to a team that is in a position where they think they can win now, but they have to take a rookie quarterback. I think the Steelers, think the Saints, somewhere like that. Maybe even Washington, I could see something like that, where they think, hey, we can plug him in and we'll be right in the thick of things. Jalen Weidermeyer, really big fan of his game. He's just one of these wide receiver, tight end hybrids, essentially. And Texas A&M's used him at a high level, and I think if he goes to the right system, understands, hey, play this guy in the slot a lot, I think he could be dangerous for sure. John Mechie's here at 37. He's a guy that has a lot of suddenness and burst, no doubt. He's a big-time speed threat, and while he's been overshadowed by Williams, you still see the moments, and he still has games where it's like, yeah, that guy can definitely hang at the NFL level and maybe be just a better John Ross, right? Where he has a few big games a year, and at the minimum, feels like he could be a threat in an offense that we talk about this all the time with the Raiders, where it's like if they have that deep threat and you have to respect that forces safeties to play back and opens up the middle of the field. And John Mechie, the third, I think at the minimum, could be a valuable asset to an offense, especially late first, early second, somewhere in that vicinity, just to open up everything else in the field. I think he brings value in that position alone. A couple of linebackers here at 39 and 40, Brandon Smith, Devin Lloyd. I'd probably flip him. I'm a big fan of Devin Lloyd. He just does everything really, really well. He won't necessarily test off the charts. Nakobe Dean's my favorite linebacker of this class, and he's down here at 46, just ahead of Christian Harris. So we'll kind of talk about all these guys now, but I like Lloyd probably the most of the bunch, but it's him or Nakobe Dean. Dean is just fantastic, and he can blitz up the middle. He's great in coverage given his athletic profile. So Dean is probably my linebacker one, and I don't normally make the case that linebackers can go in the top 10 to 15. I'd have no problem that happens with Nakobe Dean. Devin Lloyd's not going to test as good athletically at the combine, but this guy just has a high football IQ, and he does everything well. Like, he does everything at a B-plus level. He feels like the Patrick Surtain of this year's linebacker class, where he just does everything at a pretty high level, but he won't necessarily do anything that jumps off the chart saying, oh, this guy runs a 4.28 or whatever at the 40, and he's got a 44-inch, whatever. But really sound football player. Brandon Smith's more of that high-end athletic profile that a lot of teams are going to chase, and rightfully so. He looks like a really intriguing prospect, and he's been all over the field for Penn State so far this season. And the last of those linebackers we'll talk about, Christian Harris. He's this guy who hasn't necessarily played all that well at Alabama, but dude, his athletic ability is he's going to go in the top 2 to 3 rounds because a team's going to fall in love with what they think he could be, just given his athletic ability. And I think there's some pass rush upside. Maybe he's somebody that's like a better version of Baron Browning, what were we talking about last year, where he's an inside linebacker, but some of his best reps are as an edge rusher. So maybe you try to find a way where he could play a little bit of both. Think Micah Parsons-ish. I don't want to get too carried away by comping these linebackers to Micah Parsons, who looks like an easy front runner for Defensive Rookie of the Year. But I think Harris has the ability to do do something like that, where if you need some extra edge help or you need some depth or a rotational piece, he can fill into that role for a couple of plays, but also has the athletic ability to be a 3-down sideline, a sideline linebacker. So he's an intriguing prospect, and maybe ultimately it's a team that finds him and says, you're going to do one of these two things, right? Or we're going to turn you into an edge rusher, or we're going to let you be an inside linebacker, and occasionally we'll use you on blitzes up the middle because you have that skill set, but we're going to refine you into one specific area. Nicholas Petit-Frere, a guy who certainly got beat up against Aiden Hutchinson, but outside of that game, he's been so steady and solid all year long for an offense that has been one of the best in the country, right? So really big fan of his game, and the more I watch him, I just think he's easy to see fit into it, just about any NFL offense. Matt Corral's here at 50, so I think that would make him QB2. Pickett was the first one we talked about, and I'd probably go the other way around. I'd probably have Pickett 3 to 4 in my QB rankings once I get and release my big board. But Matt Corral, I think, has shown you that progressional curve and gotten better year by year. The decision making still isn't necessarily great, but he gives you the athletic mobility and he gives you a strong arm. And I think, again, it's just going to be one of those cases where a team's going to fall in love with what they think they could make him into and what they can mold him into being. And because of that, he'll be a desirable prospect. And then you got Travon Walker. This guy is an athletic freak. Georgia just, that entire defense is breeded differently, man. It's insane. But Travon Walker has everything that you would want in a high-level NFL pass rusher, right? The size, the burst, the strength. I mean, now it just comes down to refining his hands and his moves in specific, and this guy could be scary. So this could be the next like Odafe Oweh in a lot of ways, where it's like a team takes him in the late first round, and if they have the right coaching staff that can teach him how to be the best pass rushing version of himself with his athletic ability, watch out. That is going to be scary. Let's jump down here to a couple of players here. George Pickens, wild card. I haven't really made my total assessment yet. Up until this year, prior to his injury last year, I should say, looks like a guy who can go the first round as a wide receiver, but he hasn't played because of that injury. Now he's starting to get more and more into that Georgia offense, so the verdict's still out, but he's somebody who, he plays well over the next couple of weeks of the season, performs well at the combine and his pro day, could shoot all the way up to wide receiver 1. Because that's the talent this dude has. DeMarvin Leal did officially declare for the draft. There were, rumblings he might go back to school. Could have gone either way, right? If he went back to A&M for one more year and then hit his potential for what we kind of thought he might be this year, this guy could easily be a top 10 pick. Now I think he's probably in that mid to late first round conversation. And it's not necessarily that he played bad this year. It just didn't get any better from last year. And you want to see that progressional curve. Didn't quite happen with Leal, but he's someone who can play in a 4-3 edge spot. He can play 3-4 D tackle, or D end, excuse me. He can play 4-3 D tackle. I think there's a whole lot you can do with him if you're moving him across the defensive line. And the skill set is there, and he's another one of these uber traitsy type of players, and the team's going to fall in love with that. And his versatility, I still think he's a first-round lock. Kyron Williams here at 59, again, Notre Dame fan, so good to see him start to rise up boards. I'm not entirely sold on him as a starting NFL back. Maybe if he's like a compliment, right, part of a committee, I could see that. He could be the Thunder to whoever is the Lightning, so to speak, kind of cliche, but I just don't think he has that big play ability. Now, I know he did have the 90-yard OT game winner earlier this year for the Irish. I'm well aware. But that's only happened that one time, really, that you can think of. So if he had some more burst and some big play ability, I'd like him a little bit more. But he's kind of one of those 3-4 yards, churn it out. And I do like running backs like that. I said that with Najee Harris. I am partial and I am biased to running backs like that. But starting to kind of move in a different direction than how I think this position can play out, but I think the lack of explosiveness, and he's also not necessarily a great option in the passing game, so I'm a little bit lower on Kyron Williams, but it's kind of fun to see him moving up other people's boards. Another Fighting Irish player here, Jared Patterson at 65. I think he's just going to be solid. I think he's going to be a good, if you take him in the round 2-3 area, you're going to be happy with what you got. Now let's get back to some of these quarterbacks. Actually, you know what? First, we got to talk about Roger McCreary. 67 is entirely too low. This guy, the more I watch him, he's making an argument to be like CB3 or 4 for me. Like, I love Roger McCreary's game because he's so good in man coverage that you can leave him on an island. And he played fantastic against Alabama, and it's against, Mechie and Williamson, who I've been just raving about in this video. Roger McCreary is that dude. So whoever ends up getting him, whether it's late one or someone takes him earlier than, maybe 67 would suggest he's going to go, if they take him in, the top, if he's taken 15 or later, I think it's great value. Honestly, if he goes in the top 15, I wouldn't be all that shocked. If he's taken anywhere after Stingley, and I would take him after Elam, but I think there's even a conversation to be had there. So big fan of Roger McCreary. He's just a man-on-man guy. His talent shows because of that, right? Like, you put him in a position where he has to be better than the dude across from him, and a lot of times this year, he has been. Now let's get to these quarterbacks. Malik Willis at 68 and Sam Howell at 70. I'd probably put Malik Willis still at probably quarterback 2. Again, I like players with traits, right? I want somebody who, especially if I'm thinking about it as a coach, which I'm not, but if I do my job, which of these players would give me the highest ceiling? Malik Willis, without a doubt, is that guy in this class because he's fantastic. I mean, PFF stat here for you. Most forced missed tackles this year is Kenneth Walker, who's in the Heisman category and conversation. Malik Willis is too. And he's a quarterback. So he kind of gives you that ability as a runner, but additionally, rocket for an arm. You just got to clean up his decision-making and process and ability to read coverage. You can kind of tell he's not fully there, and part of that's because he hasn't had to go up against tough competition as a starting quarterback because he didn't get that opportunity at Auburn. And Liberty isn't playing a whole lot of stellar opponents, and when he did, he looked a little lost because of that. And you also need to refine some of the accuracy, but I think that's just kind of that's going to naturally come as he continues to understand the game and learn how to read defenses and understand his progressions and things like that. I think the accuracy will naturally come along with it. Sam Howell, I still have probably my top 5. I think there's the arm you can chase, the rushing ability has been put on display this year. He's done a whole lot with his legs. And I think if you put him in the right spot where he's definitely going to be a guy who has to have weapons. And a lot of people have comped to Baker Mayfield, and that feels honestly about right. I hate to agree with it, but it feels like a guy who's going to need some weapons around him to fully elevate his game. You could also say Kirk Cousins in a lot of ways because of that, just more mobile than Kirk Cousins. But rocket for an arm. And if he's kept clean and he can avoid pressure and he has some talent around him, he can make just about any throw. And because of that, I think he just needs to go in the right spot. And, Steelers fan here, I'd love to see him in Pittsburgh, depending on where our pick is and what the situation calls for. But it's a guy where I think if you give him weapons, again, I think he can be dangerous. Jumping down a little bit more, Kingsley and Nagbary, I think 77 is way too low. I mean, this is an unreal edge class and cornerback class, and there's a good tackle group as well. So bad year for quarterbacks, and they get pushed down this board, but I think Kingsley and Nagbary needs to be higher. I'd put him in the top 50. I mean, this guy has everything you want frame-wise, right? Like, he looks like an NFL edge rusher, and he's got the production to go with it. And I think he's doing it at South Carolina in the SEC, so that's impressive in itself. But it's also like a program that hasn't necessarily been great over the past couple of years. Middle of the road with Shane Bieber in his first year as head coach. Imagine if he goes to a team that, again, same thing we were talking about earlier with Travon Walker. If he goes to a team that has like a coaching staff that is capable of producing and improving edge rushers, this guy could be scary. So I'm a big Kingsley and Nagbary, but it also plays into the situation. He's definitely got to go to the right spot. Let's go ahead and jump down to talk about Myjai Sanders. This is a similar thing where he's this really toolsy edge player. Like to see him end up in a spot where he probably doesn't have to play a whole lot as a rookie. Maybe he could be a rotational edge, maybe like a Joe Tryon-Shoyinka situation where he's a part of the rotation, not leaned on as a starter, has to play every down. And you can kind of refine his skill set because, again, athletically speaking, it's there. He just needs to improve on how he uses his hands. And it's a little weird. It started to get better this year, but it's like, if you're this talented and you could be a first rounder, why aren't you dominating? People got a little better this year, but the production hasn't matched what you think could be there with Sanders. So I think he just needs to go to a spot where, again, he can just become a refined and improved pass rusher, technically speaking. Nick Bonito, I kind of worry he might not be strong enough, so I don't know where you play him. Maybe 4-3 D end. I don't know. I'm starting to waver on my support for Nick Bonito, but I do think there is still something there to work with. But, yeah, I think he's fallen down, both my board and a lot of other people's boards. Jordan Battle's here at 94, and I'm a big Jordan Battle guy. I mean, he's one of those guys who won't test. We've said this with so many people where it's like, oh, they're going to be off the charts when it comes to their athletic measurables. Jordan Battle, probably not. Nothing to write home about. But God, he's just so clean in coverage, and he just always knows where the football is going. He's got that high IQ and great tackler as well, really sound. He can also pop you over the middle, right? Like, I think he has everything you want in a safety. He's just a safe player out there, and I've compared him to Xavier McKinney, and it's not just because they're Alabama safeties, but I think there's truly a lot of similarity in their games, and I mean, Xavier McKinney, I think, is putting up some good numbers. Carson Strong here right at number 100. I'm a big fan of Carson Strong. Now, he definitely has to go to a system where, or a team in general where the offensive line is really solid, because he's not going to do a whole lot with his legs. But if it's just as simple as, here's the offense, here are your wide receivers, and it's just like a computer, right? You input where you want him to put the ball, and he can do it with the best of them, right? Cannon for an arm, and he's really accurate, and he's a smart guy too. And I think he understands that he might be the best, smartest guy in the sense of this draft class, of like reading a defense and understanding where the football needs to go, right? Like, how do I beat this coverage? I think Strong and Pickett probably are top two guys there in that category, and maybe Corral's in there as well. But I'd probably go Strong or Pickett. But there's so much to like there. He's just, you worry about what he looks like in the NFL, given how little of an athlete he is. I don't want to say little because he's a tall dude, but he lacks some of those God-given athletic traits that like Malik Willis has, right? If you had just a sprinkle of that ability on Carson Strong, and he could break out of the pocket and move it and extend plays, this guy might be QB1 with ease, right? But he, and then also the knee injury is a bit of a concern as well. So definitely some red flags, but I am a big fan of Carson Strong's and what he could do. Here's his wide receiver, Romeo Doubs. Doubs gives me some De'Ami Brown vibes, where he's like a big play waiting to happen, has good size, can go up and win it at the catch point. I'm a big fan of Romeo Doubs, and I think a team could get good value with him in the mid rounds as a potential, maybe a project wide receiver, or someone who just like kind of emerges late in his rookie year and starts making big plays. Daxton Hill, I've seen him as high as safety 2 on a lot of people's boards. Again, I still like Jordan Battle, but Daxton Hill might be my safety 3, and now he's going to get a whole lot of national attention, right? Michigan inside the top 4. If they win the Big Ten, they're in the college football playoff, and a lot of people are going to be talking about Daxton Hill, so his draft talk could certainly be on the rise. I don't know if Tanner McKee's officially said it, he's going back to Stanford, but if he declares for the NFL draft, this QB class gets a whole lot more interesting, because McKee, I think he could be in the running for like QB 1 or 2 next year. We'll see who else is in that group, but this guy has the ability to be first round quarterback, but I don't know if down the stretch he necessarily put on the production on the field or put together the tape that would suggest that, or anything quite like that. So I think he'll end up going back to Stanford, but if he does declare, it makes this QB class that much more interesting. Jaden Daniels, did decide to go back to Arizona State, which makes the whole Spencer Rattler thing that much more interesting. Final group of names we'll talk about. Zion Nelson's a player I'm really interested in as this, tight end turned tackle, and gotten better year over year, and I think there's something to work with now. And he's probably one of those tackles where you take him in the 3rd or the 4th, you stash him, and try to improve his game on a tactical level over a 2-year span, and then maybe by year 3, you're trying to have him step into your starting lineup. So he's probably a project tackle, but he's a project tackle I would be willing to take the risk on. And then let's talk about Henry 2020, I think is how you say his name. Not entirely sure about that, but another one of these linebackers I think could be sneaky. Good athlete, and kind of comes from that program, right? Bama churns out NFL caliber linebackers, and he might be the next one, along with Christian Harris. They do it in different ways. They complement each other really well, but be interested to see how he tests out in the combine, how that might affect his stock, and what that might do for him as a decision. Do I go back to school? Do I declare for the NFL draft? But that is going to do it for my reaction to this Bleacher Report big board. They do it in a different way, so it makes it a little bit more challenging to kind of talk about. They don't have write-ups or anything like that. But nonetheless, tell me what you think of their big board. Who do they have too high for your liking? Who do they have too low? Tell me what you think about my thoughts and some of the prospects I talked about. Love to have your thoughts down in the comment section. Hopefully you all enjoyed. If you did, hit that like button. It would help me out a ton. And if you're new to the channel, want to see more sports content, just hit that big red subscribe button. That's going to do it for me. Hope you all have a fantastic rest of your day. Until next time, my name is Tej, and I'm signing off.